welcome to another episode of the Chris Rod Max Show, where every week we bring you the latest news, trends, and information about AI, and we discuss it in this episode to let you know how these trends will influence the world. And I'm really happy to be back here with my two co-hosts, Rod and Max. How are you guys today?
Good, thank you.
Doing fantastic. How's everyone?
Very good. And today we have a couple of interesting things, but we also said that, my goodness, just to consume news and show it to you guys would probably not be so interesting. So we actually decided to also do some deep dives. So today we will be talking a little bit about Coca-Cola, and their AI efforts. We are also going to speak a bit about things that are happening in the AI community, especially on the AI agent front. And I also want to talk a little bit about AI to AI use cases, also in light of now AI agents taking over the world. Does this sound like a plan? Are we ready for that?
Always ready.
Cool. All right. So let's start with Coke. So Coca-Cola actually early in this year agreed to a partnership with Microsoft, and they had previously had an agreement with them on the cloud services back in 2020. There was 250 million in an agreement to develop cloud services, etc., for Coca-Cola. Now this year, they actually signed another partnership agreement with Microsoft. And believe it or not, it's 1.1 billion US dollars. And so it's 5 times more than only 4 years ago. And really the appetite here is to build together on AI, on the cloud services with Microsoft's Copilot AI. And really the idea is to become better in a lot of different organizational fronts, such as supply chain, inventory management, predictions, using their proprietary data to really come up with better customer services, marketing, etc., etc. And before we start deep diving into some of the things, use cases, etc., which I would love Max and Rod you to chime in, I want to just take a pause here and explain to the audience how this supply chain or value chain of Coca-Cola actually looks like. Maybe this is helpful for us as foundation for our discussion. So essentially, Coca-Cola doesn't own much in the value chain. So we all have been drinking Coke out of bottles or cans, and essentially Coke is only the producer of the concentrate. It's the secret recipe that they have where they mix different ingredients together, and that concentrate gets shipped to a bottler who normally is either owned by Coca-Cola, but there are also a lot of franchise businesses, and they put the concentrate, they add water, sweeteners, whatever comes into a Coke bottle, and they bottle it. So basically putting it into the can or the glass bottle. And then normally there's another player in the value chain, which is the distributor, and it's a wholesale and retail distributor network, very complex, different parties involved. And then at the end of the day, you have the retail store. This is where the end consumer essentially buys the Coke, whether it's your supermarket or your stall or any of that type of things happens there. But Coke actually puts lots of pressure and influence actually on the retail part, so the marketing part. This is why we see advertising. This is why we see any other activities on the marketing front from them. So this is the value chain of Coke. Now they have this gigantic expectation, I would say, on AI with Microsoft to now revamp and do their operations better. And maybe I will start with you, Rod. What are your thoughts to this?
Well, must say that I spent some time in my life in the fast mover consumer goods industry, that encompasses Coke, and I can see why they're going so strongly in the direction of Gen AI. In the end, all these products are almost indifferentiable. If you drink Pepsi or Coke, it's hard to differentiate. I remember back in the 90s, there was this Pepsi challenge, I think was the name. It was like this blind test on supermarkets where you will be shown, here are two drinks, which one do you prefer? And turns out that people were surprised is not Coke, but it's basically what they're drinking. And now we have so many other brands. We have all the discounters with their own brands, plus on top, energy drinks and the wave of healthy drinks and so on, right? So it's not like we don't have choices when we go to the 7-Eleven or the convenience store. And we also know by now that drinking Coke is not exactly healthy for us. So if you're in a situation where you're selling a product that struggles to differentiate itself, is not considered healthy, and on top, well, the market's very saturated, where are you supposed to grow? Well, what can you do? Well, innovation, AI, and so on. And I've seen that in the industry, as you were saying, Chris. Supply chain, marketing, you're trying everything you can in order to squeeze efficiencies, come up with some innovative ideas, and so on. While doing the research for our podcast, I was surprised that Coke started collaborating first with Bain, the consultancy, for GenAI projects. And once they saw it was promising, they started go directly to Microsoft and OpenAI to run this up. So here also we see some of the themes that we have on the show on how different players that are incumbents, but with strong business models, they're trying to position themselves in the GenAI space. But at the end of the day, those who benefit the most are the model providers, the platforms, OpenAI, Microsoft, and the like.
Got it. Max, what do you think about the 1.1 billion agreement and what do you think they're going to use it on?
So, Chris, to your question, what do I think about the 1.1 billion spend from Coca-Cola? I think first off, it's quite a significant spend, especially when the revenue are not doing well. Microsoft's 1.1 billion 5-year deal, and if I think about it, I think it's quite they are definitely thinking about doing something different for Coca-Cola. And if you look at Coca-Cola's revenue, I think this year, 11 billion, if I'm not wrong. So quarterly financials for the latest quarter, they made 11 billion, net income of 2.8 billion. So if you were to add entire year together, it's three as 12 billion or so. So like 1 billion is not a lot, especially split across 5 years. But they are thinking about changing their own, I would say, tech stack. So anything moving to cloud, applying Gen AI. And if I were to think about the business cases for Coca-Cola, it comes down to, like you said, the marketing side as well as the production side, right? So really understanding, your supply chain for producing the concentrate or moving that concentrate from one place to another. And also, I guess there will be a lot of like forecasting that they will need, when to buy what prices, because ultimately they're still a commodity house, if you will. They buy commodities and turn it into something. So there will be some financial services forecasting that is required from that perspective. And then if I were to shift gear on the marketing side, we have seen Klarna come out and say that they're going to reduce the amount of workforce required to produce those marketing materials. I think Coca-Cola will probably use, Gen AI to, I would call it, engage the younger generation. If you think about Coca-Cola, every time I want to drink cola, I would think of, Coca-Cola. Why don't I think about Pepsi Cola? Why don't I think about other colas? That's because they're always on top of our mind. And to be always on top of your mind, you kind of have to always advertise it, right? You have to inject yourself into the stream of consciousness of the entire population as much as possible. And I think for a new generation coming up, so the younger generation, if you don't do the same amount of marketing to capture that mindshare, you kind of just lose them. So I think there's a lot of marketing can be done, especially today with the woke / anti-woke. You need to kind of provide a little bit of a tailored message from a Coca-Cola perspective, right? Traditionally, the 1990s and 1980s, I believe, the world was a little bit woke, wanted to save the world. So Coca-Cola did a lot with, UN or WWF, for example. So I think being able to capture some of those sentiment, turning them into marketing would be super interesting. So what if you can do that with Coca-Cola with some sort of tailored taste, right? So if all of us kind of get a sense of how much Coca-Cola we want and we're willing to wait, right? Does that mean that we'll get tailored Coca-Cola? And my sense is, if I'm not wrong, Coca-Cola's, I would say, taste also slightly differ in different countries. But that doesn't mean that some people don't like the sweeter Coca-Cola or the less or the I don't know, cherry Coca-Cola, for example. So I guess to answer your question, I think the possibility of the technology is quite endless. But at the same time, I think if I were to hit just on the core business, because their revenue went down, their income profit margin went down. I felt that there are going to be some on the operational efficiency side, but then at the same time, they're going to spend more to try to improve revenue.
If we look at how much the Microsoft Copilot costs for companies, it's something around $20 per month. And sure, maybe like a large organization such as Coca-Cola can get some bulk discount, can negotiate price, but still, let's say like $20, $15 per month. And on LinkedIn, if you look at how many people are employed by Coca-Cola, it comes at 60 plus thousand. And this is not everyone. So according to the internet, almost 80,000 people work at Coca-Cola without including the bottlers. So as Chris was playing at the beginning of our show. So if we add all the bottlers and subsidiaries, this comes almost at more than 700,000 employees. So if we just multiply how much it costs to have these copilots times the number of employees, alone just for the employees at Coca-Cola, not the bottlers, over this 5 years period, they will spend just in this copilot more than $60 million. And then we have to think that these days, almost every product has its own copilot. It's not like you're paying for like a flat rate thing, but if you have like the Word copilot is one thing, then there's also like the Bing copilot, this, that. So it is likely that there is here some redundancies. There are multiple copilots involved. Plus on top, this deal also includes cloud services, right? So likely also they need to develop their own infrastructure and so on. So once we look at the cost of all these services, the size of the organization and so on, then yeah, this just adds up very, very fast, and it's understandable that this is like 1 billion plus that they want to spend in 5 years.
Yeah, and thank you guys for sort of like giving the audience a little bit of an understanding what this 1.1 billion actually means. And of course, Max, I think the approach you're taking on looking at some of the revenue and the profit here, it's not that big of a sum, especially over a period of 5 years. But I think nonetheless, it is a good amount and it is an investment into that. So why don't we like go through this value chain and see how Coca-Cola is using AI to like improve? And of course, whatever is publicly available, we have consumed, but maybe also giving your take on how Coca-Cola could take it to the next level. And maybe we can start with the concentrates. And it's very interesting. It seems like Coca-Cola has like an innovation or like, let's say, open innovation platform where essentially they crowd source new flavors or new ideas for new beverages. And there was an article out there that was actually explaining Coca-Cola using Gen AI to come up with the first human AI beverage. And I believe they call it Y3000. And it's supposed to really speak to a younger crowd of people. And apparently the prompt must have had something to do with the future and sort of like what is the future Coke beverage in maybe 1,000 years or whatever. And what they also tried to do was not to try to replicate a flavor, but they really wanted it to be around experiences. And the packaging also is very futuristic, designed by AI, of course. I don't know if you've seen it in the stores yet, or what is sort of your take on this?
I must say that I never really pay attention on stores. I'm one of these shoppers that just go straight to their shopping list. I don't like stroll through corridors and look at products and so on. So I don't know if they're doing this or there's something different, and so for me it's hard to perceive. But thinking about what you were saying about the value chain, something that was coming to mind was how for product development, it is rather challenging for companies to get focus groups. So you need to organize it. It takes time. You need to pay the people. In the end, you have like a small sample size and so on. It doesn't really scale. But now, for example, with agents, a topic that we discuss almost in every episode in our show, one of the use cases that people have is that, for example, we can do a focus group. We can record all their answers, use these to prepare agents where, let's say, Chris has its own agent. There's an agent for Max, there's an for Rod. And then a company like Coca-Cola doesn't need any more to, for example, bring us over for the focus group. Just with one single session, they have enough information to, let's say, host digital focus groups where they keep asking our agent version, so Agent Rod, Agent Chris, Agent Max, what do you think about this new flavor? Will you say this is good, and so on? And this way is possible to create scalable virtual focus groups and then explore new, for example, product launches, marketing campaigns, whatnot. So this is something that, for example, I will see more and more coming in overcoming limitations. So, for example, be geographies, be finding the right people and so on. and yet being able to quickly iterate and launch new products.
Yeah, of course. And now I understand why it's called Y3000. It's basically they asked AI to come up with a drink for year 3000. That's essentially the idea. Max, what's your take on this? On concentrate or recipe generator capability for AI?
Good question. I think the ability, so one thing that I'm thinking is, let's say, for example, with concentrate and with all the mixing of formula, traditionally it's always one person who knows the formula, what percentage to add to this and to that. I feel like there is some opportunity here to basically break down all the ingredients, almost create it like a digital twin, and then use AI to have a mix of cocktails, right? So if you have enough data to capture, let's say, taste profile, let's say, ability to explain, how certain taste will look like, I think then you'll be able to come up with I would say, good pattern. The question I guess I have is, I don't know if you will be able to get to a good pattern if we haven't been able to digitalize taste, for example. I actually saw an article, something around this, which is someone was able to digitalize taste or smell, something along that line. So I find it quite interesting. I feel like by combining some of those data, you can, I would say, try out different tastes and smell. So that's on the production side.
Yeah, it's very
Um,
interesting, Max. I want to react to this. I think you're bringing up a really good point, which is there's so much you can digitize, but smell and taste are definitely things that are very evasive. And I think another point you're bringing up is the patent part. And normally, of course, Coke probably has something patented. I'm not sure if the concentrate is something that they patented because otherwise it would be public. So I would guess the process may have been patented. But what I also think is interesting with this new product Y3000 for those that don't have it in front of them, it looks a bit like Barbie means I don't know. It's like a very artificial, bubbly, blue, pink, violet type of branding. And at least my first reaction was like, "Oh, it looks so artificial. I would never ever want to try it." Like, and then I'm like, "Wait a second, Coke in general is very artificial, but maybe the other ones are more natural in ingredients."
I'm looking at the ads and how the cans look like for Y3000. And this looks like how someone could imagine for some sort of so cyberpunk Blade Runner sort of movie. How do people in this type of dystopian universe will drink fizzy drinks? It feel like if you will prompt something like Midjourney or Dali, imagine how people in the future will be drinking Coca-Cola. They will likely, so Midjourney would likely propose something like that.
I think it will expand the market as well, simply because you'll be able to capture folks that haven't been thinking Coca-Cola. I think Coca-Cola is probably a bad example because they're already so ingrained in everyone's mind. I think for the younger generation, however, there may be a need to do this. So, for example, now there's a wave of, I guess, study that talk about health care food, that talks a little bit about how, processed food are very unhealthy, right? So a lot of all these, I would say, larger consumer goods company that they're in that category are looking to reinvent themselves in one way or the other, either become a healthier option or either become a more, a more straight up guilty pleasure, for example. The long term play of being able to generate new ideas based on the current zeitgeist, I think that would be quite interesting. So it's almost like, this is just an example, right? So let's say Trump won, Republican is red color. Like if Trump wants to print a Trump cola, you would do it, right? You would just sell more, for example. And then you can be able to do. You could technically do the same, with a Harris cola, right? So I think there are just a lot of opportunity that you can do with AI, because traditionally, if you want to do it, you got to destroy your brand a little bit with the whatever association you have. And it also doesn't help the fact that it takes a lot of manpower to get that messaging right, to get that product right. By using AI, you'll be able to get that quickly. You probably just need one person who has some sort of like connections to broker the deal, and then you'll be able to support that. So Coca-Cola become more of like, a interesting, I would say, addition to the consciousness of the world. Because in the US, it could be Trump or Harris Cola, but in the UK, it could be a Stammer Cola if you want, and then you can go across, right? That's just political affiliation. But let's say if you just want to do non-political stuff, it would be things like, Malaysia is famous for hornbill. Would you do a hornbill Cola, for example? So just stuff like that. I think it will really capture the local market without you doing too much of an effort.
And Max, now that you're saying that, you can take it even so further, where you're saying, okay, let's do by country or something like this product development. But in fact, you can do it even like micro targeted. As you can say, for example, so for communities, let's say like in London, where there's a high degree of concentration of Malaysians, let us have this Malaysian targeted Coke product available, where not everyone knows it, but for example, for the distribution of all these products on supermarket, the manufacturers have to negotiate with the supermarkets and normally it's a deal. So it's not, given that there's a limited space in every store. So to have the supermarket carrying your product, to have it on the shelves, you normally do some deal of saying, okay, I will pay you, there's some revenue sharing and so on. And instead of, for example, you carrying a Pepsi Cola, then put more Coca-Cola in your shelves, etc. So for the manufacturer, for the producers, such as Coca-Cola, it's very important to know which products will sell really well in which locations. And if I know, hey, in this supermarket specifically, there's a community that will consume this regional variation of Coca-Cola, then let's stock it. And this can be just like a micro edition. Maybe just this store across all London, across New York, whatever city it is, will be carrying all just this version of Coca-Cola. And the others might carry something else.
Yeah, guys, you're talking about a really good point, which is localization to local flavors. And I think in a big corporate, global corporate company such as Coca-Cola, it's really, really important to also make sure to add the local flavors. Maybe moving on to the next step in the value chain. So we talk about the bottlers, the supply chain, and if you were, let's say, the head of or supply chain or maybe the COO, how would you apply the 1.1 billion partnership agreement with Microsoft and AI on the field? Any ideas, guys?
So one of the things that so comes on is this hyper-targeted marketing. So where, for example, part of the initiatives that Coca-Cola has been doing has been creating TV ads, commercials that are entirely generated by AI. So there's one that was done to her with OpenAI. I was watching it and it looks so really impressive. So we can add it in our show and then have this play such that all our viewers can see which one I mean. So where you have is a scene in a museum and you have on one side works of art, and these works of art are all animated by AI. Plus on top there is a mix of some of the characters are just purely AI generated, so humans moving, and then they're actual actors. And you can think of not only having these type of ads targeting the markets, but also specifically, so you have all the always out of home publicity, be like posters, be large ads, or inside supermarkets themselves. You always see some standing banners, some little advertisement of these products. All this can really be tailored for a specific market, and we can have here ideas of what we're discussing now of for specific communities that they're living in certain locations, and you might have different ads, etc.
If I were to think about, how do I spend that 1.1 billion? Let's say it's going to split across 5 years, which means we already have some idea on where they want to deploy that. I suspect a lot of it will come down to the supply chain stuff first, because they already have a lot of the data. They probably do not know what to do with it or how to deal with it yet. So you almost want to open up almost like a ChatGPT or agent development platform, like specifically for I would say corporate employees that are in those areas. So they'll be able to, more efficiently query, for example, what's the production level of I don't know, factory X in this period to this period, right? So it gives you a little bit of sense. And then the prediction also happens on the front end, which is around the sales forecast that coming in, when do people buy what. You could almost like look at your distributors and say that if someone say they want 1,000 at this month, they normally get 100, so only 10% instead of like really fulfill the 1,000. So you can then match that together. So that's supply chain using AI, for example. That's one. I think the other thing, I think from a development perspective, you might dedicate a small portion of it to like a little bit more experimental stuff. So something that I'm thinking about is like, okay, if I need to engage my younger generation, where are they hanging out today? They're all hanging out digitally. Great. So which digital platform? Let's say if I'm trying to target kids, it's not like Coca-Cola will. If I'm trying to target kids, right, can I create an agent on Fortnite to play Coca-Cola games, with the kids, right? And you're literally engaging them, but using Coca-Cola's brand, using Coca-Cola as a player. You no longer have to pay, I don't know, some sort of like big X gamer to be able to carry the brand in a way. So you can, but you tag team with it. So I mean, it depends on how Coca-Cola wants to bring it forward. But my sense is, given that it's still a very serious corporation selling sugar water, they're gonna do the serious thing first, which is all the supply chain, typical forecasting, understanding their entire value chain, production line, etc.
Something that is also very interesting about all these manufacturer, so consumer goods and so on, is the brand, the Coca-Cola company, knows rather little about the final consumer because, as Chris was describing, there is this huge supply chain of you have like bottlers, you have distributors, and so on, and then it needs to be distributed somewhere: supermarkets, stores, convenience stores, etc., etc. So for the headquarters for Coca-Cola in somewhere in Atlanta, knowing how which products are working well, what's working well on a regional level, and so on, is very, very unclear. Normally, and on top, the supermarkets, these convenience store chains, they don't really reveal you, they don't really tell you how much is being sold in which location. They just tell you, oh, we need 10,000 more bottles that we will distribute internally. They don't tell you where they will distribute exactly, will they just distribute internally. So what happens very often is that all these manufacturers, they have people on the field that they go to specific locations and they try to just see what the traffic going on. They try to make like photos, maybe like interview people like in the area and say, oh, have you seen our product? Did you like it, etc. And all this can be well automated or enhanced with AI initiatives. So a common tactic that we were already doing in the industry, so 8 years ago, was we will go, for example, to a convenience store, we'll take pictures of the shelf of where is our product located, and we'll try to assess based on how many products are there, well, how much has been sold so far. And the same will go for competitor products, etc. And back then the technology was not super reliable, it was like a bit everything complicated, etc. Now all this can be taken to the next level in order to understand which products are working well, where do I need to restock or supply, and what are the trends in the market.
I 100% agree with you both. I think one key benefit from this agreement and also AI in general is definitely to get more visibility and transparency into a very complicated and very complex supply chain where most people are probably also not really digital. So I suppose, and I think this is also what the PR actually alluded to, that a big chunk of the 1.1 billion will also simply be deployed into better infrastructure, just cloud solutions before, putting Gen AI on top of it. And then, of course, agreed with you that, at least for diagnostics, you can definitely use Gen AI and find patterns and try to understand problems within the supply chain. And that is definitely something, to your point, Max, on some of the serious stuff. I think years back when I was still living in China, I saw, or I was engaging with a startup that did something very interesting. And basically, they would scrape the entire social media landscape for a brand to understand which users are posting for free on the brand. So, for example, Coca-Cola could be like, okay, please look into all the social media networks and tell me which influencers, which users are actually having a picture with themselves or with something and the brand. And I think that's quite an interesting way of also looking into, to your point, Rod, on audience segmentation. It helps to also understand different flavors. And then if you were to use Gen AI on that big data portion, you'd be able to probably cover many, many more preferences, lifestyles that will help actually to, carve the brand, evolve the brand, and also the product in itself.
Coke AI Studio, and this is an on-field marketing initiative. So on music festivals primarily, they set up a tent. You go there, and you can set up and say, "Oh, I want, for example, to create a song on this style with this album art. It will include also these other artists and so on." And then you can go to a booth and record your song. It's like a 30 seconds mini clip, and you will get a video. You'll get like song optimized. So then this way, so just festival goers can say, okay, I want to record a song together with my favorite music star. And in the video, there will be also me with my music star singing together and so on. And all this is happening, of course, so thanks to generative AI.
Yeah, definitely. So very, very interesting. We spoke about a couple of things with on Coke, and really the basis for this all is this 1.1 billion deal with Microsoft to advance on Gen AI and cloud services. We went through the value chain and understood what are some of the things that they can do with AI, starting from really the concentrates and inventing new products based on local preferences. We spoke about obviously the big chunk on the supply chain, from like better forecasting, better inventory management, and simply introducing more transparency into their complex supply chain with many, many parties in between. And last but not least, we also spoke about the marketing part with advertising now completely generated with AI, and also some of these, retail or downstream activities with direct consumers. Cool. This was really interesting, guys. I would suggest let's move to the next topic, which is essentially this whole hype on AI agents coming to life. And I think there was an article on OpenAI, or OpenAI itself also announced that they will be releasing something they call an operator. First to the research community in January, but then also to the wider audience. And essentially what it is I suppose, operator taking over your Chrome browser and being able to perform much more complex tasks, such as buying or booking a flight, or maybe even doing more complex analysis in an Excel file. I think we heard similar news also on Anthropic's side and also on Google Gemini. What are your thoughts, guys, on this news?
Just like, for example, consumer good manufacturers and it's relevant to marketing, to initiatives, something like that is happening where AI companies are maturing, and we're having reports on how it's becoming harder to have new models, new, better, so more powerful predictive models. And then therefore they need to think, okay, what's the next thing what I can do? And one of these is, for example, so going into the AI agent space. And so there are things that are happening in that space, and it's very fast moving, where you have Stripe, the payment company. They have now made possible on their API, on their interface, on how it's possible to finalize payments, that have also here agentic workflows integrated. Meaning, for example, you think, oh, I need to book a flight, and I want, for example, a flight to New York or something. On the now, this is not like a full seamless process where you can just say, okay, ChatGPT or Perplexity, find the best flight for me with these dates and so on, and then just book it. But rather, it will find it, and then for the last step, you will still need to go and then complete the transaction and pay with your card and so on. But now, this enhancement in, so for example, Stripe, make possible for the transaction to be fulfilling end-to-end. So we're coming to a point where pretty much the whole workflows are being done agent, so completely so focused on agents. But then companies like OpenAI don't really have like strong agent initiatives compared to, for example, like Perplexity. OpenAI had this framework, more academic, called Swarm, but they don't have like a final end product that allows, for example, this use case of saying, I need to book a flight, find the best times, and then book it for me. And this is something that they want to do now.
And I think on the AI agent thing, I guess it really comes down to, I guess in my head, how widely distributed it will be if you and I could have access to it. And does that mean that your agent and my agent are going to be different but still powered by OpenAI? So what I have in my mind is almost like, if there's a Jarvis, for example, right? Everyone has our own Jarvis, everyone can be their own Iron Man or women. The question is, who is powering Jarvis then at that point in time? How will data be collected? How can you and I use it in a relatively safe way when they're making decisions and acting on behalf of us? So then we're gonna go into a whole host of questions around the implications of that, right? So in the future, for example, if Chris wrote, I were to, I don't know, organize a next episode of this, right? Is it just me talking to you, or just my agent go through my own calendar and figure out, okay, there's a slot and this is the slot we're going for example, right? So do I delegate the decision making to them and then let them speak to both your agents and then just set that up? So I guess my question around this is, it then comes back to who actually owns all your action and all your, I guess, decision making process based on all the different data. Or is it just more of automating my daily life for now, and then that agent will just execute stuff that I ask them to? So I think it really depends on how far they're trying to take it on the first step. I think it will come to a point where all of us have our own, I don't know, R2D2 with their own personality online, that could potentially act on our behalf. But if you were to introduce that immediately too quickly, I think you'll have some repercussions and implications.
That is also the reason why OpenAI isn't launching it to everyone just yet. I mean, just for optics perspective and the whole fear around safety and, okay, can the system somehow misuse your personal data and like book something that you don't want or get you in lots of trouble, I think is a real concern. And I think the AI leaders of the world are very aware and also working with the respective governments and institutions to really make sure that this is safe. But this is getting me to my final topic, and it's exactly what you're describing, Max, which is AI agents talking to AI agents. And actually, there's this like trend where in the recruiting space, at least, apparently candidates are now encouraged to use AI to draft their like motivation letter and their CV, etc. And then on the other hand, you have the HR offices and recruiting offices that are screening, and they're not screening anymore, but AI is screening. And we get to this situation where you have two AIs basically trying to interact and try to match. And I think similarly, we see this also on the dating in the dating space. And I think Bumble also released something whereby their interest is for AI to talk to AI. So your AI talking to my AI and then figuring out whether or not this is a match or not. And it's quite interesting to me because it's almost like this will be one use case, I suppose, for how AI agents would interact in the future.
Chris, something that I think, why is it that nobody has already solved it is just like finding dates to align with someone. So the classic case, so you want to meet someone and then just saying, when are you available? And can you send me some slots? And then people send some calendar link or something. You need to go and then look, okay, this person has this slot available. And I think, okay, can it be like some agent or so that communicates with, let's say, like I want to meet Chris and Max. Yeah? So, and then our agents communicate and they look at our calendars and say, these are our slots available, find the best one, send the event invite. It sounds for me like so straightforward. And I wonder, how come this has not been solved as a problem?
I think there's two things to what Chris was talking about. So one was exactly like you said, Rod, right? Operationally, how do we actually execute that meeting? How do we actually pick the restaurants that we like? I think philosophically as well, there's also a matching of I guess personalities. with divorce rate at 50% in the world, I think it might actually be a good thing, just saying, right? Because sometimes your AI might know you better, picking up signs that you yourself do not want to admit that might be able to match you to better people. So I'm actually somehow a little bit pro on this from an innovation perspective. You just want to try out different things, right? I think for younger generation who are about to go on dates, sometimes you kind of just change your mindset when you go on date, but you're not truly being yourself. I think all the dating gurus talk about this all the time. I wonder with AI agent, would that change the whole experience a little bit better, helping certain people to find, I would say, matches that are a little bit more of being themselves, right? The other thing that I find that it's quite fitting to current, I would say, zeitgeist is that a lot of people are becoming more aware, both from a health perspective, mentally or physically. With all this, different AI agents being able to carry out patterns and helping you to match certain things, I think it will be super helpful, right? It's almost like a reminder that, dude, you're drinking, I don't know, too much Coca-Cola, for example. So it'll be stuff like that that I find it to be quite interesting, right? Because you're almost trying to discover yourself while going on dates, but now you're using AI to help you to discover some of those traits before you go on dates. It's almost like you're really trying to gun towards certain different outcome. So I think that's interesting. And if I were to think about then the recruitment side, same thing as well. Most of the people sometimes get into their jobs because they just want to get a job, they just want to get money. But then if you want a fulfilled career, you kind of have to ask yourself really, truly, like, is this really what you want to do? And how do you do that? You probably need to collect the right data, speak to the right people, understanding all this. If an AI agent is trained to be able to pull some of those data, help you to map some of your skills in the long term, it's actually more helpful for the individual. And I would argue probably in society as well, because you're almost mapping skills interest directly to what skills interest is required for certain jobs. And I do believe in the world there are enough jobs for people to pick up that one could be, I would say, more passionate about. So I think the philosophical view of being able to pick up patterns and then map to the right characteristics for jobs or spouses, I think that would be helpful. And I think if I were to quote something, is on the Gallup side, right? I think Gallup mentioned something like, I don't know, 40% or 60% of, I can't remember if it's 40 or 60, of people who are in jobs are unhappy. And how do you, I guess, solve that problem too with AI, right? Because if people are happy, they're producing more. There are some research papers on this. And if you're able to use AI to map it, I think that would be quite cool.
Max, we learned something new about you and your dating life, right? Not being authentic on first dates. No, just kidding. But yeah, I mean, 60% of people not happy in their jobs. Maybe something similar also in their marriages. We don't know. But maybe just to wrap it up. Thank you guys. I think this was very interesting, and I think the last bit of our podcast today we spoke about matching use case, and I think not a new problem. I think it's been ages, and if now AI agents can take another step at it and automate it to do better matching, why not, right? And I'm sure beyond dating and recruiting, there are many other matching problems out there. So let me also wrap up this episode now. For the listeners that are at Coke, and if you're working on this agreement and you need some smart heads like the three of us, please give us a ring if you want us to brainstorm a little bit more on how to deploy the money on AI and innovation. But if not, guys, thank you so much. If you liked our episode, please leave us some comments on LinkedIn or other social media channels. We'd love to hear from you. And I would say, see you next time.